Hi, I'm Simple, also hoping you're doing good, and I am back. It has been a while since I did one of these, and I figured, with the Houndmaster having released, it is about time we talk about a killer tier list. As per usual, this is subjective, this is my opinion. There are some killers that I don't play, even though I try my best to play a good amount of the roster. There are just simply some killers I don't like. I don't play a lot, so I don't understand their power to the fullest extent, and I don't have the ability to replicate what really good players can do with them. So, as per usual, this is my experience. This is how I would rank the killers. You are free to disagree, as per usual, and if you do let me know in the comments. As for the rules, let's simply go over the tiers quickly. S tier is the usual top 5. I say the usual. It's gonna be a bit different than what I've last done. A lot of things happened, and S tier is just so consistent. You can almost always win with these killers, especially if you bring strong stuff. You shouldn't struggle too hard against an average team. A tier still incredibly consistent, incredibly good, and if you go with these killers, you will also perform very well in your matches. B tier will be decent enough, very good in their own special kind of way, but not really, you know, towering over anyone else. C tier is just the weaker side, and D tier will be the completely useless tier. Like literally, D tier you can imagine as if you pick Trapper and don't play traps, just play M1. The threat of you having traps is more than what power these killers have. So yeah. We are ranking base kit, so no add-on shenanigans, since if we were ranking add-ons, the list would be all over the place, especially considering I don't know what good and strong add-ons are on like half of the roster, so we will just be talking about base kit, and I will take into consideration certain perks that affect the killers, but in, basically all of the cases, these rankings might as well be without perks, since obviously the strongest killers will benefit more from the strongest perks than the weaker killers. Yeah, that's a lot of talking. I do feel like I have to set the room though. I have to, give you an idea of what I'm talking about, of what I think, and how I think it's fair to rank. You're always free to disagree, but let's just get into it, because I know some of y'all are just skipping to the end right now. So, I've only taken some notes. I'm doing this completely on the go, so let's just start going row by row. Starting off with Trapper. Now, Trapper has consistently been one of the worst killers in the game. Some people consider him the worst. I don't think that's entirely true. Maybe biased, since I am a Trapper main. But he is pretty weak. He does struggle, and he does have his rough little edges that he doesn't perform well. He has so many bad maps for him, and even the maps that are good are tough to play on at times against the average team. So I'm gonna place him into C tier. These rankings, by the way, will also be from left to right. So left will always be the stronger one, and right, the more you get to the right, the weaker the killer becomes, quote unquote. Of course, you can play like Trapper and perform very well in 80% of your matches, and it looks like he's A tier, but it's all personal experience, man. If you want to, you can rank Trapper A tier without much talking, because this is gonna be way too long anyway. Moving on to Wraith. I feel like Wraith is a bit of a sneak pick currently. People are sleeping on the guy. He's considered to be okay. People say, yeah, he can sneak up on survivors, but if survivors play smart and there's so many pellets and this and that and those. I think Wraith, personally, he's just got everything. He's got a very minuscule amount of anti-loop with his uncloaking little speed boost and the extended lunge afterwards. He has stealth, so he can sneak up on survivors. He has a good amount of map movement, since he moves a bit faster while he's invisible. And he's just got such a great synergy with so many perks. He can run anti-healing perks. He can run, just 4 slowdown perks and gen kicking perks. It works on him. Information perks work incredibly well on him. I think he's very underrated and utilized. It's true, his skill ceiling isn't very high, but if you have a decent game sense, if you're a player at around 500 to 1,200 hours, 1,000 to 1,000 hours, I think he is a very, very solid pick, and you shouldn't be disappointed, so I'm going to put him into the upper B tier. And here we go, directly, the first thing that is different from my last tier list is Hillbilly. They have changed Hillbilly an incredible amount. Well, they haven't changed him a whole lot. They just reverted his overdrive. So, quick rundown. If you're a new player to DbD and you're just looking this to, get an idea who's a good killer, who's strong, who's not strong. So Hillbilly used to be able to use his chainsaw, as per usual. There was no downside, no upside, he just had his chainsaw, that's all. And he was considered to be a pretty good killer, good map movement, insta-shot ability, high skill ceiling, good synergy with stealth perks and information perks. And no one complained, everyone liked Hillbilly, even survivors didn't complain. Then the devs decided he was too strong, they gave him a huge nerf, they made it so that if he used his chainsaw too much, he would gain overheat, which would completely disable his chainsaw for, I think it was 25-ish seconds. So a really, really hefty downside to a power that, you want to use mainly in chase to get around the map. And I don't know what incentivized the devs to do this, but they did. And a while back, the Hillbilly got a huge change where they basically flipped the whole idea of the overheat around, made it an overcharge, which instead of disabling your chainsaw, it actually buffs your chainsaw. It makes you faster while in sprint, it makes you charge the chainsaw a little bit quicker, makes you turn a little bit less, but you also don't collide with object as much. It's a bit more finicky. Some people, especially myself, because I don't play Billy as much, they consider it to be a soft nerf in a sense that he feels different to play, but it just adds to his skill ceiling, you know what I mean? So, despite what anyone says, oh, Billy, he's so hard to play, I respect Billy players. Yes, Billy players, they are incredible. But we cannot deny that Billy is definitely one of the strongest killers in the game. In the current state, nothing wrong with that. Personally, absolutely good. And talking about strongest killers in the game, we have Nurse. Nurse is undoubtedly, quite non-debatably even, the best killer in the entire game. She has insane perk synergies with essentially anything that is not an M1 perk, because her blink attack does count as special. So, what can I say? She's the only killer in the game that completely ignores pallets and windows. Survivors got an insane setup from shack to jungle gym to a short loop and then to another pallet to another jungle gym. And they can just run that? No, not with Nurse, because she just blinks through the walls. Undefeated queen of Dead by Daylight for years. Falling all the way down from the mountain, absolutely 20,000 feet plunge, we have Myers. He did get changed in the recent patch, which was the 8.4.0 update where the Houndmaster was released. He's still not great. See, it is marketed as a buff, and technically it should be a buff, but it's more of a power shift. His playstyle changed. He doesn't have to get close to survivors to stalk anymore. Quite in the contra, he is supposed to stalk from afar since he's punished. The closer he is, the slower he stalks. Whereas before it was the other way around. The further away he was, the slower he would stalk. And frankly, while it did kind of enable him to get his power quicker, it also kind of made it a lot harder to play him. I think it raised his skill ceiling a little bit, because you have to play more sneaky, you have to play more low accurate, which I'm all in for. I think Myers is one of those characters that you just, people don't play him because he's incredibly strong. Some people might consider him fun, even though he is just an M1 killer. But personally, I think whenever I play Myers, I like to play low accurate. I like to think, I'm the fucking shape. I'm gonna go out there, and if I see a lorry, my god, she's getting tunneled out. And yeah, I still think personally that the little change they didn't help Myers incredibly well. It just made him play a bit different, a bit awkward at times even, because if you don't properly 99 your power, you're either within 3, you will find yourself in a weird position where you know, close the gap to survivors, you stand right behind them, you want to pop that tier 3, and they notice you, and since you didn't perfectly 99, rather like 95, you're gonna need like half a more second to get to tier 3, since the penalty for being up close is so harsh, really. And it's just an incredibly awkward feeling. I guess we all have to get used to that. But for now, until they slightly increase the numbers or do a little quality of life, please, for the love of God, give him the ability to stock full and then just activate evil within 3. Like Oni. I don't care. Until then, he is gonna be a solid C tier pick. A little bit stronger than Trapper since he does have an insta down. And he does have part stealth. Trapper doesn't have any of those. Hag. Now, this one's tough for me. Okay, so people are very tough on Hag. I've seen tier lists where Hag is in the bottom 3-5 killers. I've seen tier lists where Hag is in C tier. She is just slightly above Trapper, Oh, it's a setup killer, you can remove the traps. And I was always a firm believer that Hag is an A tier killer, if not even up there with the top 5 to 10 best killers in the game. Now, I have to admit, I was a bit oblivious. The ability to remove traps without flashlights definitely enabled a lot more counterplay. People have gotten a lot more comfortable, and recording this video, by the way, Hag is the lowest picked killer in the entire game, which I find quite sad. I really enjoy playing Hag. I really enjoy playing against Hag. I think she is such an interactive and fun killer. Minus her little bit of camping issues. But I do have to admit Hag fell off quite a bit. However, I still believe with the skill ceiling that this killer has, she is able to keep up with survivors if you play her correctly. She is able to get incredibly fast downs, and quite frankly, people have to start not looking at her like a setup killer and more like a chase killer. Okay, this sounds stupid, This sounds really, really stupid. But think about this. Survivor, going to shack, you pop a little trap down. Now the survivor's forced to either leave or play a 50-50 mind game with you if they run into the trap. Will you teleport and hit them, or will you not teleport? That's what they're supposed to do. However, there are killers who do it better. There are killers who are just more consistent at it, since Hag is not designed for that. Personally, I still think she's really fun. I also think she needs an entire, not rework, but she needs a slight rework to the ability to remove traps, since in the current stage she has fallen off quite a bit, in my opinion, even though I still consider her to be better than the average killer. So she's in B tier, where, I think it's a very deserved spot. Joining in as the neighbor of Hag is the Doctor. I've already given it away. I think Doctor is a solid pick. He was buffed a few times. His add-ons gotten a slight amount of changes. And he's just overall a very, very good killer. And if you're thinking, oh well, but, Doctor, people put him in C tier. You put him in C tier. I'm pretty sure I did. Yes, but a few things happened. So for once, with the newest patch, a new perk is released, which is called No Quarter, which affects self-healing in Terror Radius. Well, not technically in Terror Radius, but it affects self-healing. And Distressing, the one perk that makes your Terror Radius go up by base kit, was slightly buffed. It's not a huge buff, but it is a buff. I consider Doctor to be a lot more threatening now. So I know we're considering base kit, but with everything stacked, you can get a Terror Radius that is up to, I believe, like 58, 65-ish meters, which is really, really, really big. So, despite what people say, I think also his anti-loop is pretty good. It's pretty bland, because shock, go around, shock, go around, shock, go around, shock, go around, and then you get a hit, and then you just repeat that. But He is not a bad pick at all. Moving on, Huntress. I'm embarrassed to see. I was on Twitter the past couple of days, and I have seen a lot of people placing Huntress in like mid, low B tier, maybe even like C tier, because they think, oh, Huntress, she's just not as scary anymore. There's better projectile killers. And while that's true, I still think Huntress is a really threatening killer. I feel like these people don't play against skilled Huntresses enough, where she does have an incredible skill ceiling that is way more than just, oh, you go to a pallet, I pull out my hatchet, you don't drop it, I put it back and I chase. You go to pallet, you drop the pallet, ha, hatchet it. That is part of a kit, yes, it's a 50-50, but she still has so much potential to get shots around the map, to, she's one of those killers that can get so much value out of aura reading perks. It is incredible. And while she is not up there anymore, I still think she's a very consistent pick, and she deserves to be in A tier, in my opinion. Moving on to the Cannibal, Baba Sawyer. Well, what a ride it has been for this guy. He was released as a complete cesspool. He was so bad, arguably one of the worst killers in the game, if not the worst at that point. He was dog shit, quite frankly. Then people started realizing, oh, he's got barbecue and chili that gives you double blood points per match. Then they started using him. They realized he's fun. He got a rework. He became really strong. And now he's at a point where he's comfortably strong. He does have lethality in his kit with the insta-down. He does have not direct anti-loop, but he can shorten loops, because the threat of that chainsaw is just there, even for healthy survivors, and they will pre-drop a pallet 1 or 2 times before, otherwise they would run around the pallet 1 or 2 times more. So I think he is a completely fine, middle-of-the-road pick, since he has just a little bit of everything. And his power can, by technicality, be used to go around the map, but I've never seen a Bubba do that. I ran the numbers. I'm pretty sure it is worth it by an increment of like 8%. It is completely not useful. The laughing stock of DbD, well, there's 3 in a row, quite frankly, is Freddy Krueger. Nothing much needs to be said here. Now I know BHVR announced a rework for Freddy in January, so it should be coming within a month or 2 from now on. But, here's the big but. In the current state, he sucks. He's so bad. The whole idea, of him being a dream demon, and when survivors fall asleep, they are in his world. Realistically, when's the last time you played against a Freddy and you were scared of being in the fake world, in the dream world? You were like, oh no, what if he has fake pallets? What if he has set up a snare? What am I gonna do? I don't even hear his terror radius. That is so... You're not threatened by that. You don't care. You just sit on your gen. When you have the lullaby, you pay a bit more attention. You are aware of where he went, where he goes. You can hear him teleporting to gens around the map. So even if you're unsure, you can just leave the gen, scout the area a bit, and if he comes, you just have a little bit of a head start. There's nothing threatening about Freddy. Real sad story. And I'm so sorry, because I like playing Freddy. I like playing Sharp and Joe. It's a bit of a meme, but yeah, I do hope they change that, and the next killer tier list I will do in a few months will have Freddy at a much more comfortable position in B tier, maybe even in A tier, though I don't think people will appreciate that. So let's hope for B tier, where he is a relatively threatening but not too great killer, that they do more with his dream world, because right now, as I said, it doesn't feel threatening, especially with the ability to just get out whenever you feel like it. You get hooked, you're out. You have a box, you get out for 90 seconds. You miss a skill check, which can happen, intentionally or unintentionally, you get out. Teammate can wake you up. It's a bit ridiculous. Um, Moving on to the pig. Now, it's a bit tough to rank the pig since I don't play her a lot. And people always argue, yeah, but she is one of the few killers that have actually, have a good passive slowdown since a survivor will take on average around 40 to 60 seconds to remove a trap. And while that's true, right, the threat of the traps does not affect good survivors. Don't get me wrong, in solo queue, it feels horrible getting downed, you have a trap set on your head, and then a gen pops. And before you're even hooked, well, I get unhooked, I get healed, and I'm gonna have to search 3-4 boxes, whatever. But if you have a decent team and they realize that you have a head trap on you, they might not pop the gen. So the fact that survivors essentially control your lethality of the power already diminishes so much of your potential. And not to say anything against against Pig, but she doesn't have any control. All she can do is place down traps and just hope that survivors who will, have a trap, even if it's not active, they just immediately go ahead and search the boxes, which most people do, in all fairness. But even then, if a trap isn't activated and you interrupt the surge, it doesn't buy you anything. It doesn't make the survivor, sweat a little bit. It doesn't incline fear. It's just kind of, okay, guess I'll come back to this one. Or I'll just search another one. So, yeah, she did get a bit of buffs to her add-ons, and her dash is quite nice, I dare say. It's not a horrible anti-loop, it's also not great, since you can't moonwalk during it. Frankly, I think if they made it so you can moonwalk during it, she would be a little bit better. But nonetheless, she is an okay killer on the weaker end, but she is still fun to play since she does have a stealth aspect, and her passive slowdown, at least against the average team, cannot be ignored since it is lethal. Moving on to Clown, and here is one of my controversial picks, okay? I think Clown is underrated. I frankly believe Clown is not as bad as people say he is. He has a decent anti-loop, survivors need to feed him pellets, so just slap on Brutal Strength and you're good to go. And, he does have his weaknesses, he doesn't really excel at anything, but at the same time, there's killers with worse anti-loop, there's killers who have not much to their name, and while we're ranking base kit here, not to mention that he has some of the best add-ons in the game, for information, for lethality, for just stronger power overall, looking at you, Flask of Bleach. So overall, I dare say Clown is actually a pretty solid pick. If you become good at him, I personally believe Clown has quite a high skill ceiling. Like, oh, right, the guy, throw bottle, slow survivor down, hit survivor. What's the skill ceiling? But I'm a firm believer in the 200-something page Clown guide. I actually do think that Clown is one of the better anti-loop killers in the game. Well, he's better than people assume, at least. I wouldn't say he is a strong pick, nonetheless. There are better options, but I think people are kind of sleeping on him, Never underestimate a Clown, you never know what they might do. Spirit. Now, I have always been a contender for Spirit not being an S tier killer, but rather an A plus tier killer, since she has counterplay, people run Iron Will, especially when it was buffed back. Genetic limits happened. Genetic limits enabled her to just play without the worry of Iron Will, without the worry of Dead Heart, without the worry of Lithe. And Genetic limits is a decent perk on most killers, frankly. But it works especially well on Spirit, and on one killer we'll get to in a second. So, despite what I was saying earlier, like in my previous videos and my previous tier lists, I think Spirit is comfortable in the top 5 killers. She is just a beast, and even base kit, she can do some serious damage, and with genetic limits, as I said, she has barely no counterplay, which is what makes her so strong. If you had a visual indicator where the Spirit was, that would be a completely different story. That would diminish her whole power. She would be like a B tier, right? But that's not the point. Don't want to get stuck too long. This video is already going to be so long. So moving on to Legion. It's tough for me to place Legion since against new players especially, Legion seems like a very overwhelming force, you know? He has this ability that guarantees him a hit. He can drag survivors very easily. He has lethality if he hits everyone. He has speed and map traversal if he gets 1 or 2 frenzy hits going. He is just, for new players, he feels like a bit of an everything god. But once you realize that being injured isn't a death sentence, you know, even if you got hit by Legion's Frenzy, now what? He will leave you to hit someone else in Frenzy, and you can mend in like 8 seconds, I believe, and get on a gen. New players are afraid because, oh, what if the killer comes, you know, I'm just instant down. If they hit me, I can't even run away. So what? Legion has a terror radius, he's a basic M1 killer, unless he has some specific perks, or some stealth, or some, you know, serious commitment to the cause, whatever, he will not usually catch you off guard. And once you start to realize that, and once you watch some, you know, gameplay and stuff, you will also realize better players, they don't heal against Legion at all. Like, at all. They will literally stay injured the entire match, because it's a waste of time. They spend 16 seconds healing, 2 people, mind you, for Legion to undo that within like 2 seconds. So, while he can keep everyone injured, you know, he is, in theory, a good killer. He's in practice just not that strong. Moving on. Plague. Perfect placement, actually. Plague is just better Legion, isn't she? Plague is just frankly what Legion could be. Now, don't get me wrong, Plague does have her weaknesses, but she's remained untouched for quite a while. She got some quality of life buffs a good while back, but that's about it. They never really changed her ever since she released. Yeah, she did get a little fountain, you know, at the start. She did get quicker recovery speed and whatever after puking. So nice small buffs. But overall, she's just always been consistently a good killer. She does what Legion can't do. She actually keeps survivors injured. So even if Legion manages, let's say, down someone early on, be it in Frenzy or not, and then get them again, because, you know, let's say they have author records, so they don't bring Decisive Strike, so Legion hits them in Feral Frenzy, cancels power, hits them normally, they're in Deep Wound, off the record, won't activate, and they're hooked again. So let's say 4 3 gens, 1 person down on hook. They can heal. They can heal. And there's nothing Legion can do about it. Yes, they can pop the power, but even then you still need to pop the power, get the hit in, run after, stop the power. That still takes you about 3 seconds to, you know, cancel out the tantrum afterwards, and they will get distance on you. While Plague, realistically, if you're on Death Hook and fully infected against Plague, what do? You go cleanse a fountain. Oh, but fountain cleansing takes a bit less than, you know, healing normally, so that's good, right? No, you give Plague what is arguably one of the strongest powers in the game. 60 seconds of just being able to essentially chug 10 bazillion hatchets, not at that range, you know, that Huntress can, but still. She has so much lethality during those 60 seconds that good players, they will literally, after they hear Plague take in a fountain, they will hide. They will stay in corners, they will hide, they will not be seen, they will not make a sound. And that should tell you all you need to know about Plague's lethality and how strong she can be against the average team. So I consider her to be just a way more successful and way stronger and way more, you know, healthy designed Legion in that sense. Ghostface. Newest patch, small buffs, 3 second less cooldown. I believe 10% quicker mark duration, or a quicker mark for survivors. Nice buffs. Okay. Didn't change much. He is still a mediocre to bad stealth killer with incident potential. The thing that makes him truly shine is really understanding his reveal mechanic as the killer. Because how many times as Survivor have you directly, like, you've stared into that Ghostface's soul, you've seen him, he stands in the open, nothing around him, no corn, no whatsoever, and he just doesn't get revealed. And if you realize how that works as the killer, if you can kind of play around it, it becomes a bit tougher to reveal you, but even then, you get one insta down, so what's the big deal? However, even after Myers' big buffs, quote unquote, I still consider him to be better than Myers since he has more consistent stealth and you can choose when to be stealthy and when not to. He has a better idea, well, idea is not the right word, he has better management of his resources, of when he can down which survivor, and I personally think Ghostface, a good Ghostface is scarier than a good Myers, at least if you're not considering add-ons. Add-ons obviously elevate Myers way, way higher, but we're not talking about that one today. Demogorgon. I think Demogorgon is one of those middle-of-the-road pigs, frankly. There we go. He's just good. He has okay anti-loop. He can get a hit in some, structures, but not in all. You do need a bit of practice with him to understand his range, but once you get that down, there's really not much you can learn about him. He's a very simple killer. He is a very straightforward killer. His portals, they did get buffed okay-ish, I guess. His teleporting speed through portals got buffed significantly, in my opinion, which makes that part of him a little bit more viable, which is nice. But he's still okay. He's not super duper strong. He's not weak in any way. He's just okay. As I said, very good. Same as Baba, middle of the road killer, who you can't go wrong with picking him, just slapping on 1 or 2 slowdowns, and you should be fine against the average team. But do expect to struggle a lot against good players, because this killer has counterplay and they will abuse it. Oni. I'm not sure. See, people, they consider Oni to be a strong killer in general, per se, but they also say, oh, but Oni needs the first hit, and good people, they will usually, they will play around and Oni won't get his power for the first, 60 to 90 seconds of the game, in which case, most of the time, the survivors will already have done 2 or 3 generators, and the game's already over, and Oni is a snowball killer, yes, but can he snowball that much? Personally, as this tier list is from an average player, I have barely under 3,000 hours in DbD, to average players, I'm assuming. He's strong. He can secure a first hit very quickly. Perks such as Lethal Pursuer work really well on him. Discordance works wonders, trust me. Perks such as, what's the name again? Deadlock work incredibly well for him to prevent him from that early game struggle. And generally, if you become a good Oni, he is a bit tough. He is just a very, very tough force to be reckoned with. Having an Oni that gets blood early on, most people, they give up, surprisingly enough. I like playing Oni personally, and sometimes I've had games where one survivor, they ran into me on accident or whatever, and I get a hit within 30 seconds of the game starting, and I've had people literally disconnect on that. The game isn't over, but for them, it's okay, the Oni gets his power for free, we can't win this, it's over. I might as well not waste my time, which is crazy. Moving on to one of the most debatably okay-ish to strong killers, I guess, which is Deathslinger, since Deathslinger is such a skill expression character. He is such a skill expression character. I cannot stress that enough. If you have 7,000 hours, and out of those 1,000 or 2,000 are on Deathslinger, you will excel. You can shoot through so many little gaps, so many loops. There are, I dare say, not a lot of bad maps for you. There are a few, but once you learn the little nooks and grannies, nooks and crannies of every little map, once you learn the spots where to shoot through, and once you, learn when to fake and stuff, he becomes so strong that I was considering putting him in A tier, slightly below Huntress. However, for the average person, they will not have all that knowledge at their disposal, but all you need to know is that he is very good at dealing with pallet saves, since you can just, before downing a server, you reel them out of the pallet. He can deny a lot of strong windows, he's very good on open maps, and overall, just the existence of his, gun is already a little bit of an anti-loop on shorter wall loops or loops with bigger openings. So I consider him to be a pretty strong killer in general. The only thing he struggles with is map presence, I guess. Where, it's the same for Huntress, it's the same for Plague, but they make up for it in their own special kind of ways. My literal enemy. I'm currently playing Silent Hill 2, and I fucking hate that guy. Pyramid Head, the Executioner. Honestly, I don't think he's ever budged. He's always been a consistently good pick, and while he is an incredibly, incredibly hard character to learn, and he feels so clunky to play, because when you use your power and you want to, get that little, what is it called? Trail of Torment, condemned thing, whatever, the ranged attack, you will feel, if you've never played him before, you will feel so helpless, because it just feels so bad. It doesn't feel smooth at all. But once you get used to that, once you learn Survivor's dodge patterns, once you become a bit more patient with him, you have to remember he's a 115 killer who can hit through walls, who has a slight range attack, a bit like Nemesis, but through walls. He has no direct downside, he has no cooldown on that. While he does stand still for around a second after using it, despite not hitting you, he doesn't have a cooldown, he can use that infinitely, so if he traps you at a loop, you will go down eventually, it's just a matter of time. Plus, he is one of the best tunnelers in the entire game. He completely ignores Decisive Strike Unbreakable if you are tormented. He can just send you to a cage. He doesn't need to pick you up. He doesn't need to slug you, since he can't get flashlight saved while he sends you to a cage. So overall, all that together, not even to mention that his anti-loop, tormenting you, most people are afraid of being tormented because he gets so much tunneling potential from that, and he wastes so much less time. I and many others consider him to be a very strong pick, and I still think he is definitely up there. So if you want to learn Pyramid Head, more power to you. Very strong, very fearsome killer. My favorite, the Blight. Talbot Grimes. Much like Spirit, I've always been a contender for saying Blight. Base Kid Blight. He's strong, yes, but he's not that good. He's just good high A tier. He's not S tier in my opinion. Well, I've changed my mind. A lot has happened, and I don't actually remember if the changes were out when I recorded the last tier list video, but Blight now, basically what they did, they completely reworked his bump logic. He doesn't slide off cars anymore. He doesn't slide off walls anymore. You can't do those fancy moon slides and 180s anymore. Well, technically you can on some tiles, but it requires so much skill. It is incredibly inconsistent, and even some of the best Blights out there, like Momo and Lilith Omen, they just don't really go for those anymore because they know it's just inconsistent and it doesn't provide as much value. And while removing that fun factor I had in Blight from sliding of stuff and, moon rushing, they have buffed him because the way to play him now is just to be more efficient. Bump logic, bump that, bump that, bump that, go around that, hit. You can still turn 90 to 120 degrees if you have a high enough DPI. Sometimes you can even manipulate the game. I'm not very consistent at it, but good Blight players are, to almost turn 180. And overall, he is just, next to Nurse, the king of Dead by Daylight. Like, they two just rule the entire game. If you load in and you have a Blight, I understand the frustration of survivors. However, I still think Blight is a lot more fun to face than Nurse. I will make a fun to face tier list as Survivor in the near future. I'm planning on that. So be ready for that one. But yeah, Blight is just overall, that small change they made. They basically, what they did, they removed his fun and they made him so much more consistent because people are quote unquote forced to play him in the efficient kind of way. Twins. I like to shit on twins. Not because, they're ugly, which they are, both of them, but because I don't like the playstyle that they provide, that they excel at. I don't like that they're French. But we can't have everything that we like. We can't, while this is my video, I can't just go out there spreading misinformation, at least not that I would tell you. And all things considered, I think Twins is a very solid killer. Despite the memes of, oh, we won't buff Twins from behavior, saying, oh, they're a beast as high tiers. I believe them. I've seen Twins gameplay. I believe that Twins have the potential to be one of the most oppressive characters in the game. They are bug-ridden, however. They have a lot of issues in their coding. And Victor doesn't always do what you want him to do. But it's not as bad as another character we'll get to in the very end. You probably already see this coming. But yeah, overall, I think Twins is just an incredibly, incredibly strong character. Especially now that Charlotte can recall Victor at will. And you can no longer hold him hostage as well as you used to be able to. It just makes them so much more consistent. They are one of the best slugging characters in the game. I don't know what needs to be said. Despite all that, they are still very hated. They have one of the lowest pick rates. Consistently, like, top 5 lowest in the game. And it should stay that way. Good. Moving on. Trickster. Trickster, I like to defend. I like playing Trickster. I think he is fun and quite hot, frankly. And I would. Not the point of this video. Trickster is incredibly, incredibly weak in the current state. He does not feel very rewarding to play. I liked playing him when he had the skill ceiling of, increased throwing from the blades. He had his main event that he could only hold on for so long. Now Trickster just kind of feels like, short loop, use blades. No short loop, you're 115. You just go around and hit. It was a buff, technically, but I still think he is overall just not that great. The dilemma that behavior faces, however, is that people already hate playing against Trickster. And people don't want to see more Tricksters in their games, which I understand. I don't mind Trickster personally, but there are just some situations where you feel like you couldn't do anything better. You cannot do much more than, not be on the map or whatever. So, yeah. But in the current state, Trickster is quite weak. I consider him to be probably top 5 worst killers in the game, personally. Nemesis. Ever since his release, his zombies have been an AI power of all time, I will say that. We have different AI-powered killers, such as, we have Nemesis, we have Knight, and I guess we have Houndmaster. Yes, the dog is slight AI. The dog has own pathing for getting to gens and whatever. And all of them have proven that the AI part of the power is the thing that drags them down. If you, as the killer, cannot consistently control a part of your power, you will always have to assume you're going to miss out on it completely. You will always have to assume the worst, that this power is not going to work. For Nemesis' case, the zombies are going to get stuck. The zombies are just going to be in a corner somewhere with no gens. The zombies will not react to survivors nearby. And it's true, it happens. There are, however, some matches where zombies, they seem to magically appear out of thin air for survivors, and they are just in a doorway. Running from Nemesis, so a zombie in the doorway. Fuck you. Nothing you can do. No counterplay. Despite that, completely ignoring his zombies, his main strength is the tentacle, which is considered to be anti-loop by some. I consider it to be a chasing tool, more of the kind. Since you do save time for instead of just M1ing, and you do catch up a little bit quicker, technically. And yes, while it does have anti-loop properties, the best case for the tentacle is eating pallets up. If survivors drop a pallet, you use the tentacle. I think Nemesis is downright the best pallet eater in the entire game, and while he doesn't have the lethality of Bubba, he comes very close to it, and the inconsistent but existent passive slowdown from the zombies does put him in a deserving spot in the middle of B tier, one of those very solid, can always play kind of killers, especially since he doesn't have any bad maps, really. I guess his only bad maps are big maps, which are bad for every killer without mobility. So what more do you want? Pinhead. I have a lot of tough choices to make in a row here. I'm sorry, Pinhead enjoyers, if you even still exist. A good friend of mine used to be a Pinhead main. They have played Pinhead so much. They understood box logic to perfection. They understood chain spawn logic to perfection. They, did things I didn't even consider possible with this character. They elevated my thought of, yeah, he's just a slightly above average, he's just slightly above average killer with a decent anti-loop, a little bit better than Clown because of the passive slowdown. They elevated my mind to, shit, this guy is like an A-tier killer. He is so strong. He has so much tools. He has so many tools at his disposal, he can do so much at once. But they've changed a few things. They've changed box logic. They've changed how the picking up the box affects you. They changed the Franklin's thing a long while back. And I feel like people, they just adapted. They realized that Pinhead isn't that strong. You can get rid of his chains easily by running through terrain, by breaking them. Pinhead himself can break chains for some reason. Honestly, that should not be a thing in my opinion, but who am I to change that? I'm not a game dev. So overall, he is a consistent pick, but not as much as he used to be, which I think is kind of sad. I like Pinhead. He is one of the harder killers to play, and he deserves a bit more love, in my opinion. That is to mention, before I forget, as I said, I'm doing this without any big notes. I just have my little sticky notes, basically, and I don't have this written down, but Pinhead is an absolute solo queue stomper. Since you cannot be sure if someone's going for the box or not, you always have to assume no one is. Yes, adding the UI and everything long ago made it a lot better, but it still happens, because sometimes you see someone getting off a gen and you're like, okay, they're going for the box, and then you see them on a totem, and it's like, what are you doing, Meg? Please. But overall, yeah, I don't think anything more needs to be said for Pinhead himself. The artist. This is a tough choice, and people consider her to be really good. I also think she's a very, very good killer, but she doesn't quite cut top 5 killers in the game. But she is the well-deserving, silver... what is it called? A silver trophy for basically second place, right underneath the S tier. She has a decently high skill ceiling, and once you get really good at artist, she has everything. She has map knowledge with her crows, since she can scout out survivors from across the map essentially. She has a little bit of a scare factor like Huntress, where doing a gen in the open will be scary, but doing a gen not in the open is even scarier somehow, because the crows just go through walls. She does struggle on multi-layered floors. She does struggle on indoor maps a little bit, but despite all that, she has very good anti-loop, since if she places a crow in a good spot in a loop, that loop becomes completely unusable. And she can just extend the time that crow's up by a lot by just placing down another one. So, by technicality, if she places down a crow, you either run into it before she can launch it, and you take the swarm and then just risk getting hit by a crow afterwards, because she has 2 remaining crows, or you're just forced to leave the loop, take the M1, and that is what makes her so strong. Yeah, I don't believe I need to say anything more. I believe Artist is just an incredibly consistent pick, which is surprising why I don't see her that many. Like, I don't see her in my matches at all. I think I face one Artist every 200 games, which is crazy. she's also pretty fun. She's one of the few killers I prestige 3'd before the prestige update. Moving on. Onryo. People consider Sadako to be quite weak, which I guess isn't untrue, because her stealth isn't really true stealth, since she does have a lullaby. Especially with the visual heartbeat indicator, which many people use, and I also use just for convenience. But she has map movement a little bit. Not as good as other killers, because survivors will turn off your TVs. But the one thing that puts her just slightly above most, of these could be stronger, is alright killers, just slightly, is the fact that she has the condemned mechanic. Now, in your average match, if you're not going for any condemned stacks, you're not really paying attention, you will usually not see anyone be at max stacks of condemned. But if you go out of your way and make it happen, it can happen pretty consistently, surprisingly enough, especially with the right set of add-ons, which again, we're not talking about, but it can happen. And having someone condemned is so good. Even if they're out on death hook, if they were just unhooked, and you teleport and they just get a stack before they can get a tape or whatever, you can completely ignore Decisive Strike. You can completely ignore Unbreakable. You can completely ignore Flashlight and pallet saves. You can just kill them on the spot. So despite all of that, I consider Sadako to be okay. The only thing she needs, in my opinion, is a little bit more engagements. She feels very bland to play against. Her counterplay is simply grab a tape, stay on a generator, do the generator, move around the map, maybe turn off 1, 2, 3 TVs, up to 3, and then go to the TV that was revealed and put the tape in. You don't have any stacks, and now 4 TVs, the few you turned off, plus including the one you just put the tape in, are disabled for 60 seconds. That's all there is. That's all you need to do against Sadako. I think one more engaging thing you could do with her is maybe enable her to do stuff quicker while demanifested, interact with the map a bit quicker, vault quicker, kick pallets quicker, stuff like that. I'm not a game developer. As I said, I don't know how to fix this, but I do think she is better than some people consider her to be. Dredge, aforementioned friend who played Pinhead so much, is an avid Dredge hater, so I'm afraid I have to put Dredge in this spot. But I think Dredge is a killer who's just got a lot going for him, okay? So let's list it off. He has very, very strong map movement. Yes, survivors can lock the lockers, but how many times? They can lock each locker once. So by technicality, if you don't move around the entire map and only have like 3-4 hotspots where you want to go to, you're not going to be interrupted for a lot of times when he teleports. And that's not even the part of his power, that just does make his jump scare potential for free hits a bit less, but that's not the main part. Secondly, he has a slight anti-loop with his remnant he can place down. Where I say anti-loop, I'm talking about a mind game, 50-50, basically, coin flip. Will he teleport, will he not teleport? Woo, scary stuff. Good survivors know how to play around this by just leaving the loop, because Dredge is fucking slow while deploying the remnant, but against the average survivor, it will work in a lot of hits. It will definitely result in a few. And lastly, his main part, his passive build-up to the pinnacle of strength of Dredge, is the Nightfall, where he has essentially no cooldown. He almost instantly teleports around the map to lockers. He becomes completely undetectable. Survivors will see like 5 meters maximum. They will not be able to locate themselves without aura reading perks or whatever. And it's just really, really, really nice if you're playing as a Dredge to see how confused survivors are. Not even to mention that you do get killer instinct from teleports and remnant teleports. So you even get information if you teleport through the map. And since you have basically no cooldown, you can just sniff out if survivors are hiding out your Nightfall. Overall, just a very consistent killer. Very fun to play. He does have a significant negativity about his anti-loop, which is, of course, holding W. But that's what most killers have, so I don't want to be too harsh on him. He is a good slightly above average. Killer, can pick, can play, no worries. Okay, let's get into the final few. Final 10 actually. I'm gonna be taking a quick break. I'll be right back with you. Okay, back from a quick break. Went outside, got some fresh air, and drank something, which was really important. My throat was starting to hurt. So moving on. Where did we leave off? Wesker. And I consider Wesker to be a really, really niche character. I know this sounds stupid since he is a very high picked, very much liked survivor by killers. Very much liked character by killers. Jesus Christ. I've seen a bit of a division on the survivor community where some people love facing Wesker, some people hate him. For me, it really depends. I don't mind a Wesker every few games. I don't like Wesker when I have him 6 games in a row. That's not a joke. A few days ago, I was playing Survivor, and I had 6 Weskers in a row. And it wasn't even the same person. It was 6 different Weskers behind each other, you know, where I think it's a bit of a weird thing to have a character that is so fun to play as that people just start to enjoy playing him so much that he's seen too much. However, I still consider Wesker, in terms of strength, to be one of the stronger ones in the game. He is a very consistent pick. He has everything going for him. He has anti-loop. He has great perk synergies with basically everything, since he has map movement. And he has passive slowdown with his infection, which, while it was nerfed quite significantly, going from 8% slowdown at max rate to 4%, is still scary enough to have to cleanse from it. So it's not like Nemesis where you just don't care about the vaccines really. And more like, yeah, I better go out of my way, grab this supply case and spray myself. And while it doesn't take too long to, unlock a case and spray yourself, for some reason, that's one thing I still don't get, by the way, is it takes longer to apply a healing, what is it called? A healing spray, I think, compared to Nemesis vaccine. I think Nemesis vaccine should take a little bit longer. Might be a controversial take, but Wesker's slowdown is just more common because he has more supply cases around the map, and he infects people a lot more. And not to mention what good players can do with him, it is insane. If you've ever seen a clip of like a very good Wesker where they hug an object really tightly and just rush around it in the most crazy manner possible, it is insane. It is absolutely ludicrous. And he just has a bit of everything. The only thing holding him back is his big terror radius, but that is also a strength if you consider stealth perks. So if you put on Unforeseen, if you put on Trail of Torment, which is a bit of a double-edged sword, obviously, he is very scary. Good Weskers are very, very scary to face, and I assure you, if you've never faced a very good Wesker, he is a very hard force to be reckoned with. So he is definitely deserving of like top this and this killers. And going quite a bit down is Knight. They reworked Knight a little bit ago, where he now can cycle through guards as he wishes, which is very nice. His guards, however, do have a long cooldown. It's no longer like, I don't know what it was before, 10 seconds-ish after the guard expired. So you can use them for more, how do you say, situational situations? That sounds really stupid, but you can use them more effectively in certain situations, and overall, I think he's a solid pick. If you become good at Knight, you have a lot of map pressure. You can still hold generators so well with your guards, and it sounds stupid, but you do have stupid amount of passive slowdown, since survivors, for some reason, they don't like if you send a guard out and they start chasing a survivor, after half of the hunt duration, about 10 seconds, a flag will spawn. If they pick up that flag, the guard despawns. You get a haste and an endurance effect, so you can even use it if the Knight is nearby. And for some reason, survivors, they just don't do that. They just hold W, they just vault windows and go to the opposite side of the map, where if the survivor is stupid, which shouldn't happen realistically, but it does happen, they just run into a dead zone and they don't touch a gen for like 40 seconds because they take the time running into the dead zone, then they have to run all the way back to the generator, in which time you could have already sent out a new guard to kick the gen. And yeah, overall, he is a decent map control killer. He does miss his map movement, where he does get a bit of haste after deploying a guard, but what is haste after standing still in place for like 3 seconds, 4 seconds? And he doesn't have an anti-loop really anymore, because if the survivor sees you place down a guard, they know you have to draw at least, I think it's 10 or 12 meters before you can deploy the guard, so they will just leave the loop. And unless it's like a main building that they cannot really leave, it is a tough time to actually get downs on night. But the ability to push survivors off gens from afar is definitely making up for it, in my opinion. So I'm putting him in a solid B tier spot. On the lower end, mind you. On the lower end. Skull Merchant. I was afraid of this one. Well, afraid is a strong word. I am filled with joy, personally, to say that, and I know you've seen a lot of it, so I won't talk around the bush for too much. Skull Merchant is the worst killer in the game right now. The only D tier on this list. Skull Merchant has essentially no power. Oh, but her drones... No, her drones don't do shit. Survivors can crouch to avoid a drone. They can take 2 drone scans before having any negative side effects. They can take... If they're injured already, they don't care about the drone effect. Skull Merchant doesn't have anything. Plus the fact that the drone doesn't even scan fast vaults. So if you time a vault right, the drone won't even detect you. It doesn't detect you through line of sight blockers. The only thing drones do is give you a tiny bit of undetectable. And at that point, play fucking Ghostface, play a Wraith, play any stealth killer, really, please, I beg of you. Skull Merchant is the worst killer in the game. I hope they do something healthy to change her, but I don't see them doing that, which I also don't mind. I think everything is better than the Skull Merchant we used to have, so I won't mind the placement where she is right now, though I do, obviously, as a killer main, wish for every killer to be at least playable. Going from complete bottom of the list to one of the highest spots is Singularity. Singularity has gotten stupid buffs for some reason. He was already a very solid killer, but he's just become a lot more solid. And there is currently a thing going on with a brown add-on that reduces the time the bipods take to come back from being disabled by an EMP, and Thrill of the Hunt, which reduces the cleansing time on Hex Totem, on any totem, to be exact. Increases the cleansing time. Cleansing speed is reduced. And I'm sure they will address that somehow. They will either nerf that add-on or, preferably, as I hope, adjust Thrill of the Hunt to be a little bit more manageable. But he's, despite all that, even if you don't run any totem perks on him, he is such a good killer. He has amazing map pressure with his pods. He has a bunch of information, since he can overlook entirely, like the entire map basically, or 80% at least. He has great chase, because on a slipstream survivor you can just teleport to over and over again. You gain haste, you gain immunity to pallet stuns, you gain faster vaulting and kicking speed. He's just such a versatile and good killer. He synergizes well with chase perks, which reduce the time he needs to down a survivor even more. He synergizes well with slowdown. Who doesn't? Big surprise. He synergizes well with information, because even though he can see survivors, it might help him if a survivor spots out a dead zone of one of your cameras. And while he does have an incredibly high skill ceiling, in my opinion, he's also one of the stupidly easiest killers in the game for the strength that he provides. It sounds dumb, but if you really want to brute force it, you just start a chase, you put down a pod, you slipstream the survivor, and then you just keep teleporting on the survivor, and they can't do anything realistically. So he's definitely deserving of that spot. Some people might argue he's even better than Artist. He is deserving of the 6th best killer in the game, which, spoiler alert, yes, there is one more S tier killer. But I think he is just very overtuned in a lot of ways. Personally, I think he deserves a little bit of a nerf. Completely ignoring the entire Thrill of the Hunt fiasco. But I still consider him to be a high skill ceiling character. Might be a bit, what is he saying? What is he trying to get across? But you probably know what I mean if you've ever played Singularity or played against him, especially. So I won't drag that out for eternity now. He's a strong killer. If you want to play him, if you find him fun, go ahead. Skill ceiling, there's always a little bit more space. You can always get better at him, and you will have consistent results. No problems. Moving on to Xenomorph. On release, I considered Xeno to be an A tier killer. Now, looking back, I realize he is not. He is really hard countered by turrets, and there is basically a necessity to run at least one of the add-ons that makes turrets weaker or makes you stronger against turrets. The best one is the green one that reduces turrets range by 2 meters. And there's also a yellow one. I believe it makes you a little bit more resistant to the flames. It's always good to pack the both together. But the necessity of having to run 2 add-ons, which we're not even considering here, already makes him a little bit less versatile than most killers. Even though considering he has some of the strongest add-ons in the game, in my opinion, or the most unique ones at least. And overall, he's just okay. The fact that he can't enter the control stations whenever he wants makes him a lot... He feels a little bit less of a map presence master. For example, Demogorgon, yes, you do have to place a portal and then you have to, put that in a good spot. But when you see survivors are near that portal on a gen or whatever, you place down another portal within a second and you teleport there. On Xenomorph, you have to go out of your way, find another turret, like another vent or whatever it's called, go in there and then you can move. And they are at predetermined spots. There are some maps, like Swamp for example, where the turret spawns, like the vents, I guess, can spawn in a literal dead zone corner where nothing is, where no survivor would ever be. So that's just a part of your power gone. You won't use that. So good Xenomorph players, what they do is basically they don't use the tunnels at all. They only use them in dire situations when they need to get to a gen really quickly and they are just conveniently near a tunnel already, or if they need to get their power back. Which, talking about, which is his main strength, technically, his tail, it is incredibly, incredibly tough to hit. It feels like a worse version of Nemesis. I'm just gonna say it. While it technically does have a bigger range and less downside, technically, you get slowed down a bit more. You cannot drag it as much as Nemesis. You don't destroy pallets with it, which makes sense, But all that just plays together and puts him at a very uncomfortable, it's alright. And he does have a lot more going for him than the killers below him, so he's not deserving of C tier or whatever. But I do consider him to be on the weaker end of B tier. And he just does a few things in an okay way. You can basically imagine him a mixture of Demogorgon and Nemesis, but a little bit worse in both aspects, which is not something you want, usually, realistically speaking. Anyway, moving on to Chucky. Now, Chucky, I have to admit, is a killer I don't like playing. I think he is very, very one-sided. He's very boring to play, but he is stupidly strong for how easy he is. They did rework him, they did slightly nerf him in this patch, but that didn't change anything, really. He still gets a free hit every, I believe it's like 15 to 20 seconds now. So he's a mini spirit in that aspect. His stealth aspect is good, but the fact that survivors have like fake footsteps is also so annoying. And his main strength is his size. And while you might say, oh well, but around short loops where he can't be seen, you see his footsteps. Yes, but I don't know if you've noticed, but the footsteps actually have a very tiny delay of like a quarter of a second, which can make or break the difference on getting that pallet stun because he's coming around the corner or not. So I still consider him to be one of the better killers in the game. I still consider him to be incredibly, incredibly strong. in most aspects, especially considering he has a bit of everything. He has decent anti-loop with his size, he has good map movement if he uses Slice and Dice, he has built-in stealth that's stronger than most killer stealth, because he even fakes out survivors, and even low-tier survivors, they might get scared because they see the footsteps and they might be like, oh, better go off the gen, and every 15 seconds, they're just not going to be repairing gens for 10. So, yeah. Also, not needless to say, he has got great synergy with information perks, because survivors will usually be hiding out around him, and one of his best information add-ons, Rat Poison, was nerfed, which again, we're not talking about add-ons, but you get the gist, you know what I mean. Moving on, the direct neighbor to Chucky, the Unknown. On release, I thought he was a weaker Huntress. Now, I realize how blind I have been. He is so scary to face, I'm not even gonna lie. The fact that he can be semi-everywhere, unless you're playing like a 3 or 4 stack as Survivor, you don't really know where he could be at all times. He works incredibly well with stealth perks, he has amazing lethality, and some of his best add-ons, which again we're not talking about, but some of his best add-ons will keep you in the weaken status effect, I believe it's called, for quite a good amount of time of the match, even if he's not actively infecting you. And even then, you can fake the projectile with him. He's incredibly awkward. He needs, like, you need to have a game audio of 500% to actually hear him put out, like, the UVX. It's a bit difficult. He has very little counterplay. He has an incredibly high skill ceiling. He can hit through walls if you're already infected with the UVX. And all that together is just very, very strong, in my opinion. He's just a decently strong killer with very little counterplay, which is what makes him so good. This is what makes all of the top tier killers so good. Vecna got some, I wouldn't say buffs, I would say adjustments last patch. His flight cooldown was reduced by a significant amount. His Flight of the Damned, like the skeletons, and the Dispelling Sphere were slightly buffed. However, the Dispelling Sphere was also slightly nerfed in that aspect, but not in an aspect that matters really. And the I believe it's called Mage Hand, the hand that grips pallets was also slightly nerfed. I consider Vecna to be very versatile and very fun to face and to play as. However, he is RNG based. The fact that survivors, it's complete luck if they find the most useless fucking, oh, you see the Lich during flight item, or if they find literally fucking teleport on the other side of the map. Fuck you. You know? That's just what makes him so inconsistent. He is fun to play, he has a good skill ceiling in my opinion, but he's just not strong in any significant way. I consider him to be decent, slightly above average, because he just has a little bit of everything, but he doesn't excel at anything, really. And quickly talking about the hello? Hello? Thank you. Quickly talking about the Dispelling Sphere, I think it's called. So the cooldown was the cooldown was decreased by, I believe, 5 or 6 seconds, something like that. But the time it disables the magic items was reduced from 60 to 45 seconds. That is a pretty significant 25% difference. And that some people might say, oh, that's quite hefty, you know, if they have the Gauntlet of the Enveloper or whatever it's called. The one that gives you haste whenever he uses Mage Hand. That's gonna make it a bit weaker. However, that didn't really affect him, since considering if you use the Dispelling Sphere from across the map, you usually want to be informed if survivors are on a gen, let's say, or if survivors are in this corner, whatever. You don't really care about disabling their magic items, since most of them don't do much anyway. And if you did, you could use it in Jace. Since it's active from frame 1, if you use it, you can just throw it on the loop and run the survivor into it, basically. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Vecna is still a decently strong killer with good techs and very interesting combinations of add-ons, which again we're not considering. Okay. I hope I don't have to justify myself for this, but I will still do it. I believe Dracula is S tier. Now, this sounds stupid, right? Some of you, maybe. But Dracula is a killer with a really high skill ceiling. But you have to consider he has 2 anti-loop powers. Basically, Mini Demogorgon, even better because he has 2 pounces, and Mini Nemesis, because the flames do go through and over small objects, mind you. And as if that wouldn't be already strong enough, that would already give him a solid A tier spot, in my opinion. He is also basically a better spirit. He has spirit's power without cooldown, really. It's a 3.5 second cooldown. They changed from 2.5 to 3.5. If you have good audio, you can use bat form, go right on top of a survivor, go like vampire form, and immediately hit them. There's like half a second delay before you can hit again. It is crazy, crazy fast. I think they should increase that when switching from bat form to any other form, not the other way around, to at least 1 second, maybe 1.5, but that would be a bit too punishing, perhaps. But yeah. As I said, he just has Spirit's power on a 3.5 second cooldown, essentially. And he also benefits quite a bit from genetic limits, which, yes, he does not benefit as much as Spirit, because survivors will get a bit of distance. He has to M1, then he has to switch, and then he has to catch up, and in that meantime they could walk. They're 8 seconds off. But even then, personally, I just think he's a better Spirit in that sense. If you don't even use dog form and just use human form to M1 and bat form to basically play Spirit, on average you will do a little bit better, from my experience. Maybe it's just bias because I really like him. Some people would argue he is high A tier at best, but I personally believe he is definitely one of the 5 best killers in the game. Now, the Houndmaster. The killer that broke DbD. She is fundamentally broken. Her power does not work in an intended way currently, which, yes, it is bugs, but I cannot rank something that I don't know how it would affect if it wasn't bugged, you know? I'm sure they will release a hotfix, they will release some patches, they will fix it, but the current state Houndmaster is just broken. And I don't mean broken in the, S tier sense, literally the best character in the game, no. I mean broken in the, pun intended, dog shit character. Like, she's... Why does she exist? Her map movement and ability to focus stuff is good. The dog has a lullaby, so you can know if the dog is coming to you. The speed you get is 6 meters per second. Wraith does better, and he gets quicker hits because he can uncloak and hit someone. Wraith is like, I believe, 5.6 while cloaked, and Houndmaster gets 6 meters, so it's a very, very small 10% difference. Houndmaster, he is bugged. Like, sometimes you throw your dog on chase, and it just doesn't do anything. The dog just stands there and looks at you like, nah, I ain't doing all that. Fuck you. You know, like it's a bratty teenager or something. It is realistic, yeah. You know, dogs won't always follow your orders, but it's not good gameplay-wise. It sucks. It's horrible. And even if you do manage, if you're lucky enough, I say there's like a 25-30% chance that it happens, that the dog just doesn't do shit. Sometimes it's in a completely random spot. Even if you do hit your dog with the chase command, and it's just a weirder and a little bit worse Deathslinger, since they can counter it by dropping a pallet. You can't control where the dog drags them. Yes, there is a logic behind it. The dog always drags the survivors to where he was originally sent out. But sometimes that's a bit of a, how do you say, it's a bit of an ineffective path that you have to take to hit a survivor from an angle that they wouldn't expect with a dog, since it is fast, yeah. So it will just kind of drag them around a longer side of a loop when you want to go for the hit. I think the struggle that survivors have is a little bit too much. They have a bit too much freeway when they're bit by the dog to go around, navigate 2 pallets, because if you pallets on the dog while he bit you, you don't get any penalty whatsoever. And that's all pretty bad, yes. I do believe she has incredible potential if they fix a few of the kinks that she currently has. She has a very high skill ceiling in my opinion, and she could potentially be up there in B tier, maybe around here, who knows, I don't. But in the current state, I don't recommend playing her because the worst thing about her, frankly, is if you use the search command and send the dog to a gen. First of all, that feels horrible. It's so inconsistent. Sometimes, it points you at the gen, you use the power, and it just sends the dog like 10 meters in front of you. I hope they change that in a way that they increase the sensitivity. I do like that you can set the dog to complete gens and to exegates and to totems. That's good. I like it. But if you send the dog to gen, right? You follow the dog's trail, which, by the way, isn't always optimized. So sometimes you won't even be taking the shortest path possible. And for that speed boost, which technically does elevate, but it also, it's kind of not as worth it because you don't take the most optimal path. And secondly, after using the surge, before you can use anything else, the cooldown after surge is, I believe, half a second. It is incredibly fast. But first of all, the dog has to come back to you. It has to physically walk back to you, to your location, and what the game registers at your location is very small, actually, so the dog actually has to be with you directly to get your power back. Both of your powers, mind you, since they both rely on the dog. There are moments where you just don't have a power after sending the dog out, and even though it's supposed to come back, you don't have a power for like 15 to 20 seconds, and it feels horrible, it feels horrendous. And while that is something I hope they change, like adding a failsafe if the dog takes longer than like 5 seconds, 10 seconds to come back, he gets teleported there. The main thing that holds her back is just how clunky she feels as well. There's so many things wrong with her. She's just, I'm sure you've seen a lot, like a bunch of fucking videos, just explaining how weird, how bad, how unique the Houndmaster is. I do have to give her that. She's a very unique and creative killer. She comes with very interesting perks as well, but overall, she's just not good. Her power is very weak. And I was considering putting her below Trapper, even below Freddy. But she does have a little bit going for her. She does have an okay anti-loop, a lot better than Freddy's actually. And while she doesn't have a direct teleport, she does have a little bit of map movement. That is also one way you can guarantee your dog is always off cooldown. If you send your dog out to search to a generator, you go with the dog. If you're near the dog when the search ends, the dog will return to you quicker. I think that's obvious. But the game also doesn't get the dog stuck somewhere. But yeah, that's basically all I wanted to say. This is my killer tier list for patch 8.4.0. It's a little bit longer than I was anticipating again. But I hope you enjoyed. It was necessary in my opinion. So yes, do let me know what you would change, if you agree, if you disagree, if you think I'm stupid, if you think I'm a complete moron, if you just, I'm actually a one-trick Sadako, and I always get 4 kills. Feel free, just slap that in the comments, and make sure you check out my other videos as well that aren't 1.5 hours long, where I just talk and nothing else happens. But yeah, have a great day, and let me know what kind of video you would like to see next. Thank you so much for watching.